Hi, my name is Jayreid. I'm a psychotherapist in San Francisco, California. Today I want to talk about the beliefs often held by survivors of scapegoated abuse at the hands of a narcissistic parent. And the belief I'd like to start with is that of I am physically disgusting. Okay, so in prior videos, I've really tried to lay out the psychology of the narcissistic parent, why it's almost overdetermined that they have to select a child as the scapegoat and then systematically and targetedly emotionally abuse that child via the process of pathological projective identification. And just as a quick review, in pathological projective identification, the narcissistic parent relocates their own sense of deep worthlessness in the scapegoated child and then acts in ways to influence that child to identify and sort of take on as their own that sense of worthlessness. So what can happen in the face of such chronic treatment by the people who were biologically programmed to expect care and protection and love from is to adopt beliefs about oneself in relation to others, starting with this narcissistic parent, and about the wider world in general, that facilitate complying with how this narcissistic parent is treating the scapegoated child. And it's important to do this as a child because a child obviously is small, and this is a world of big adults and dangers. And if you're a child and you don't have an adult looking out for you, willing to protect you, or at least believe that you have an adult who cares about you in that capacity, the sort of terror and the sense of vulnerability would paralyze any child. So it's important to erect these kinds of psychological frameworks to feel convinced that an adult has your back, even if that adult treats you so contrary to that, which is the case, tragically, of what happens when a narcissistic parent targets a child into this scapegoated role. For instance, somebody who believes or adopts the belief that he or she is defective will actually have a much easier time accepting the narcissistic parent's hostility, because in some ways that kind of belief interprets the parent's hostility as, well, this is kind of what I deserve because I am defective. So it would be sort of nonsensical for me to expect to be treated in any other way. So that being the rationale of these kinds of beliefs, in the sort of psychology world, we call them pathogenic beliefs. They were very important to adopt and maintain when facing narcissistic abuse. And once we sort of reach adulthood, or there's a little more safety to be had and other kinds of relationships available, they can prove to be very grim, constrictive, and impinging on one's quality of life and potentials. And so just a side note, that these kinds of beliefs are often the target of therapy to recover from a childhood relationship where one was the victim of narcissistic abuse, particularly scapegoated, or being the scapegoat. Okay, for the first type of pathogenic belief I'd like to discuss that scapegoated survivors can sometimes hold is that of I am physically disgusting. It can take a lot of different forms, but in essence, the theme here is that one sort of rejects one's physical appearance, one's physical body itself. So there's this sort of attitude, or at least consciously held attitude, of disgust, rebuke, and rejection for how the scapegoated survivor regards his or her physical presence in the world. And this kind of belief very much mirrors the attitude that the scapegoated survivor was met with in their family of origin, and particularly by the narcissistic parent, that of sort of utter rejection for, in essence, kind of existing. And we've talked before about like why the child selected to be the scapegoat can sort of evoke the narcissistic parent's sense of their own worthlessness if they happen to possess qualities which that narcissistic parent wishes he or she had for themselves. Not unlike Snow White in The Evil Stepmother, who tells the huntsman to take her into the woods and bring me her heart, because Snow White is now the fairest in the land. That metaphor, I think, holds true to why certain children are often selected into the scapegoated role by the narcissistic parent. And I think that example is kind of relevant here because, in that case, it was Snow White's beauty that evoked the murderous hostility and envy-based rage in her evil stepmother. And that is often, or can often be the case for scapegoated children and then survivors of this, where, just through the birth lottery or whatever, they might have been endowed with good looks, qualities that are sort of found to be attractive, physically speaking, being extremely athletic, having physical prowess, and whatever those sort of assets are, the important thing, I think determinant here, is whether the narcissistic parent sees those qualities as a threat to his or her own very fragile self-esteem. And if that's the case, then it's imperative for the scapegoated child to find a way to deny those qualities, or at least cast doubt upon them internally. In essence, to not take pride in those, because to do so for the narcissistic parent would be received as an act of provocation. And in this kind of asymmetrical relationship where here's the parent and here's the child's sort of only hope to survive is to minimize the damage inflicted by the parent. And provoking that parent in this kind of arrangement, the narcissistic parent in this kind of arrangement, would be irrational to do. So it's really to the scapegoated child's credit that they can adopt such really painful beliefs about their physical selves and persist them in order to sort of get through what they have to get through at the hands of the narcissistic parent. It's interesting, in my practice, I see so many folks who, like, if we were to sort of take a survey, let's say, they would be regarded as physically attractive, physically strong, and yet their internal sense of their physical selves is that they are sort of a liability to themselves. That they're, say, too skinny, or overweight, and in these cases, that would not be the consensus for how they are received by most people in the world. And so in essence, that you could think of it as like the body image is not aligned with their reception by generally the rest of the world. It's interesting too, there's something in the psych world called body dysmorphic disorder, and its definition is persistent and intrusive preoccupations with an imagined or slight defect in one's appearance. And that really captures the essence of, I think, what this sort of belief that, I am physically disgusting can yield. And I don't, this is very anecdotal, and certainly no study has been done, to support it. But I wonder often if when folks report symptoms of body dysmorphic disorder, whether or not a history of kind of scapegoated abuse, it may be in play. That it's an interesting and important overlap in sort of noticing and recovering from this form of abuse. Well, I hope that today sort of shed some light on the form and the function of this sort of pathogenic belief that one is physically disgusting as a means to kind of comply with how the narcissistic parent is treating the scapegoated person in this way. And next week we're going to move on to another commonly held belief by survivors of scapegoated abuse at the hands of a narcissistic parent. And thank you all for your viewership and participation in the comments section. I intend in the near future to do a video that addresses a lot of the comments and questions put in the comments because I just think they're very worthwhile and really deserve some direct responses to. And with that, I wish everyone a happy new year, and I look forward to posting again next week. Thank you.